Hey everybody, I am Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and today I'm going to show you how to paint this gorgeous wave in watercolor. This is a really beginner-friendly lesson. I'm going to explain the techniques, why they work, how they work, so you know what's happening for yourself at home. On the mic is my husband, John.
Hello.
He's going to make sure that as I am teaching you step by step how to paint this wave, that you can really see what we are focused on. And you did this on both Facebook and YouTube, yes?
I did.
Yay! We did it right. Correct for us. So this particular live is on both Facebook and YouTube. The next few won't be, but we're live on both. Sometimes we have trouble with the Facebook chat. Guys, we are not ignoring you. It's just a new glitch in the system. So you can see this gorgeous painting here. And let's go and talk about the materials we're going to be using. Woohoo! See, that this is it in real life. All right. So the first thing to know about this is that I am working on a 9x12 pad of watercolor paper. The watercolor paper is 140 pounds and it's 100% cotton. That means it holds water at a very even rate and keeps it in the paper longer. So that can be nice for you as a watercolorist. This particular brand has, I think, the best sizing. That's the glue that holds the paper together and is on the surface on the planet, and that is going to be part of what's going to help me do the technique where I lift. Now, I'm going to be heavily using paper towels. These are just regular discount paper towels that I got from the store. These don't need to be special, but you'll need some to wipe your brushes off on and some to crumple up to do the foam removal. I will be calling out the colors of paint, but I'm going to be honest, guys. If I'm using my Phthalo Blue and my Ultramarine Blue in combo, and you have a bunch of just like Crayola colors, right? You would just use two of your blues together. You don't have to use exactly what I'm using. What's more important for you at home is to pay attention to how light or dark it is, because I will explain to you the trick here. So in the wave, we will be working a little shadow under the curl, right? We will have this very lightened opening. There's darkness coming down in this part of the wave, and then there's a reflection coming back in and then back into the water. Now, if there was light behind here, all of this would be very aqua and transparent. But since there's not, since it's overhead, the light part of our wave is here. Understanding where it's dark and where it's light and the directionality of the brushstroke is really the magic sauce of the wave. So, you know, Carol T says, I need some of that paper. I'm going to be really honest. In watercolor, the first thing to upgrade is the paper. I have a friendship with this brand. I buy these pads, but they send me a lot of these too because they appreciate that I talk about them. But I mean, I met the owner. This company is 8 centuries old. So they're good at paper at this point. I feel, and they're still owned privately. They haven't become part of a conglomerate or anything. They're still privately owned. So they have that personal relationship to it. Today, I expect to be using Phthalo Blue, Ultramarine Blue, Phthalo Green. I'm probably going to use nickel Azo Yellow, I think, and I might get into a little bit of my Payne's Gray to deepen the wave in a couple of places. And we are going to be doing wet into wet, and then we're going to be removing it. Now, I do want to tape this off, John. So I'm going to take artist tape.
Away.
I'm going to take artist tape, and I'm going to tape my edges. This is 1-inch tape. It's a low tack painter's tape. And the reason I do this, and I didn't pre-tape it because some of you asked me about the tape and could you reuse it. These are used, I don't know how many times. I can reuse this tape on several paintings. I think I've gotten them as far as 10 because I'm not trying to create a water resist in as much over here as I'm trying to create a space for the framing. So this is a trick that I'm going to do. If you haven't seen painter's tape, you can find it at the hardware store and you can find it at the art store. The art store painter's tape tends to be more expensive. If ever you wonder why, it's because it does not tear the paper or canvas. Right? And so that's why it tends to be very popular. I'm going to do it this way. That way I have the longest edge here. Sometimes I can be a little messy when I'm taping. So this is all it takes to tape it down. And then I'll show you how to remove it. But I'm going to just very lightly burnish with my fingers. Can you see that, guys?
Cool.
I have the hardest time removing my page off the pad when I'm done. What am I doing wrong? Are you using something like an artist knife to remove the sheet? Or are you using a loose leaf pad? If you have open sheets on your pad, you may need to get a ceramic cutter. I recommend ceramic because it doesn't cut you, but it cuts paper quite well. or an X-Acto knife to pull it off the pad with a straight edge ruler to make that cut. If you're using a block, you've got to lift it on the corner with an artist knife. Oh, I can't tell where the pages are. On the block, on these, it has, see, you just go like that. So over here, if I pull, it's not going to move. Those are glued together. But over here, when I pull back, I can. And that means I can come in with this and then slide it around. Sometimes this will release for me. So that's the secret of that.
Yeah, sometimes that hole is
John,
in. Yeah?
I didn't bring my water cups over.
I'll get it for you.
I need 2 water cups.
But that little hole that you have to cut into, the reason why it can be difficult to see is it's not in the same place.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It isn't in the same place. John's going to go get the water cups. It's not always in the same place. But that's how you look for it, is you just pull your finger along it and there'll be an area. On Strathmore and I think Arches, the keyhole tends to be at the top here. And so it's a little hard to see there where it ends, but it's between here. So you check here on your pad, you check on the corners of your pad is generally where you'll find the keyholes on those to remove those. I can't believe I forgot my water. That was silly. All right, one thing that I can do while I'm waiting for my water is I'm going to take a mister bottle. This allows me to evenly pre-wet the paper before I even apply my brush to it. If I'm trying to wet out a bigger area of paper. And I'm going to use a wash brush. This is a nice big kind of wash. It's the number 22 bright. I'm just going to go back and forth. See? We could step. Why don't you step? I forgot we were stepping today. Step 1, wet the paper. Step 1, wet the paper. You're prepped now, wet the paper. So there was a little bit of paint on my tape, right? And then it came out here. Guess what I would do if I had color on there I didn't want? This is where good sizing matters. See how that pulls the pigment that I didn't want out, even though I'm putting that exact color pigment in. I just want you to know. Sometimes if you reuse tape, it will have pigment that you can release back into the paper. But this particular one was the tape I used for the blue, so it's still blue, and that's good. Now, my first trick here, right, is I'm going to need to, I'm just making sure my paper is very evenly wet. See how I'm doing this? Just making sure that there's an even coat of moisture on the paper. And I'll do this with a watercolor pencil so you can see it. Over here on the left, about 2 inches, right? I'm going to make a little line. This is watercolor pencil, so it's just perfect for this if I want to do sketching. That might go away. This is the angle of the arc that I'm going to want for the wave. And then I'm going to want in here a very sharp looped area, right?
You see Amy's question there?
I maybe didn't because I'm looking down.
Yeah, this is really good. What does the term immediate mean when it comes to watercolor?
You know what? I don't know the context of that, so I don't know how to answer that. If you could give me more context.
Yeah. That's why it caught my attention. I was like, I have not heard of that either.
Yeah. But there's information. So I'm just drawing this so you can see this. This is the shape that I'm making. Now I am going to do a cool thing here. I'm going to get my brush wet. You could use a round. You can use this big one. I'm going to get some Ultramarine Blue. Loaded pretty heavily on my brush here. See how heavily I'm getting it?
Yeah.
I'm going to go across, coming down like this. And it can be quite, dark as we go down. And you can see the watercolor kind of almost vanishes. That's why I wanted you to see it. Now I'm going to get a little bit of my Phthalo Blue. And come across here. Lighter. See how I can pick it back up? My goal here is to make sure that the area inside the wave is lighter than the outside. And before this is all dry, so this is all wet, and this works because of the sizing, guys. I have good paper. If your paper isn't doing this, there's a couple of things it could be. It could be that the paint is staining, like some paints are staining, or it could be that the paper doesn't have good sizing. I'm going to bunch up a paper towel. And I'm going to begin to tap it up and down, right down to my water line. and then up over my wave here. See how we're doing that wave? Now I've got my line coming back here in this arc.
Yeah. Sounds like the contextual answer to Amy's question is that watercolor may be a more immediate gratification. You get the image very quickly.
Oh, okay.
Media, as opposed to things like acrylic, which requires many, many layers.
Now I got a little thick here. Yeah, but watercolor can be very many layers and not always immediate. I can shape my foam, see how I'm doing? If I don't like any of it.
Foam shaping.
So the little foam that I made with my paper towel, I can really shape it.
You know, we didn't put a step up after you painted the background.
Did you?
No, we did not go to a step
Okay, I'm not in a new step yet.
Okay, we're still on the step 1.
Yeah, we're still on step 1.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm not like misstepping. Ha!
Oh man. All right, so you can see I can play with the shape of that and I can make that sea foam any way I really want it to be. Now, I'm not going to pull up any of the water or anything on here. And the reason for that is, guys, that I really kind of want. There we go. I'm going to want blue here and I'm going to want this wave here. And so I hope that was a cool technique for y'all.
That was very cool.
Yeah, I think Amy's right. In the context, when someone is speaking about watercolor paint, they keep saying something about painting being meaning. So when you say they, I assume it's some online teachers. So there'll be terminology in any art community that can be specific to a small niche or broad into the larger community. And what I would say is there's an immediate type of painting in watercolor, but at the point it can get more complicated than that. That's all I'm saying. All right, did we step a new step?
We can now.
Let's step a new step. I'm going to get a round brush is what I'm going to do.
It has been stepped.
This is a number 14 round. This is going to be good enough for what I'm doing here. And I'm going to begin to work the colors of my wave. Now my wave, I'm going to want to take a little bit of my Phthalo Blue. I can even get a little Phthalo Green into it, my friends. See that? And I'm going to make a nice dark color. Come under the foam. And along here, and I'm going to just brush down. Notice that I'm brushing down in a curve. Can you see the directionality of the curve?
Yeah.
That's what's going to be important.
It's curvy.
It needs to be curvy. Now, coming through here, I'm kind of inclined to be a little lighter in that wash. Notice how I am?
Yeah.
And that's because I'm going to come back maybe with a wash brush and pull some out.
Oh.
You could use sponge or paper towel here too. I'm just pulling out some color. Just to lift up and to start informing that reflection in. I'm going to come under this wave here. I like to really play with this sea foam. And you can see I'm curving that stroke. I come under the little sea foam. I'm not going too far with pigment into what I've got there. And then under here, right, I can say that the foam is hitting the wave there. And I'm going to brush back up. So already we have the beginning of something that is wave-like, right? I'm going to want to keep going before this entirely dries. In this particular watercolor, water is our friend, I feel. So I definitely want to, making sure I've got foam there, keep that up. So John's going to throw up a step, but we're going to keep working while it's wet. All right. Wonderful sharing. Wonderful sharing on that. And Amy, I'll come back and I'll get an industry-specific answer for you on how they might mean immediate. I'm going to come through here and we're going to keep adding more color. Now, I'm going to get darker. And to get darker, guys, what I can do is I can come into my ultramarine blue. Here's some more ultramarine blue. I've got it all over. And I just want to load up a nice heavy amount of Ultramarine Blue. And I'm going to brush it down. And I'm mixing it in the wave. See how we've mixed it in there?
Yeah.
Still curving those strokes. I will have some of them be longer and some of them be shorter. Absolutely. I might exaggerate my little keyhole there.
Oh yeah, that's
I don't
nice.
paint out everything that I have. I just, you know, add in. And the reason the block is nice is because it deals. Oh, thank you, Rita Wilson. Thank you so much. I'm going to continue coming here now. Remember, I talked about using the Azo Yellow, right?
Yeah.
Into this little mix. I've got the Phthalo Green and the Phthalo Blue here. These are Aqua colors for sure. I'm going to brush that in. To this little region. I may even come back with my paper towel and lift some reflection up. See how we're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's nice just to pick up some reflection. And you can always rinse off your brush thoroughly and dry it out with a paper towel and also lift color a bit. So you've got lots of ways to lift your color. Now inside here, it's definitely also kind of in this aqua space in general. So I'll put a little bit of color there. I don't want the pigment to be particularly dark.
Yeah.
I'm going to come in here. And that's just because often there's a little bit of light coming through. And I'm going to wiggle around my foam, as you can see. Sometimes I'll get a little bit of more aqua and kind of come in here to the depth. Now just pushing it with my toe a little bit, but look, I'm leaving a little bit here. You can always come back with your paper towel and work on that seafoam coming back.
Yeah. What's that?
Hmm.
Hold on a second. Let me check something.
I'm going to come here with just a little bit of my blue, my ultramarine blue. We're going to come along this, wiggling with that line. See how I'm wiggling it? That's the trick. Now back into a heavier load of ultramarine and phthalo blue. Very heavy between the two of them. And let's come inside. And really darken some of this. See how we're doing? We're just really darkening some of it. With a very heavy phthalo load. And this works pretty well, guys, because I'm going to come on the toe of my brush and just kind of wiggle it in here. Notice that those are finer lines. When I wiggle those in, I go curving flick. And that also creates some motion in the water.
Cool.
And because they're going to soften, and you can see me rinsing out a little bit, lightening the pigment load, right? Every time you rinse, you lighten your pigment load. More of my yellow. Just pulling a slightly higher reflection there. Now, one of the other things that I can do is I can take a little bit of my Payne's Gray and my Ocean Color, my Phthalo Blue. You can come under the wave here. So we darken that quite a bit. It's still blue because I mixed it into the blue, but it's darkened quite a bit. This
Yep.
little edge here is darker. A little bit of the Phthalo Blue, Phthalo Green.
Yep.
Now the next fun thing that I can do, right, as I'm painting my little wave, is I can come in with a little bit of my watercolor that you see here. I want it even lighter. I want it to be just a wash almost, because as it dries light, I want
Yeah.
it to dry very light. I'm just using a round brush, and notice that I'm making little irregular. You see how we're making little irregular shapes in that?
Yeah.
And I'm just a lot of water, not a lot of pigment. Doesn't matter which set of watercolor you're painting with, you're just, preventing the little pigment from being a thing. Maybe a little darker through there and let it blend in. And then definitely through here, we definitely want to have kind of some splash, don't we? Maybe a little shading under that splash.
Yeah.
All we're doing, we're just playing with that. We're wiggling that around. If I want to reactivate some of this and pull the wave down on this a little bit, notice how I reactivated this, and this is why sizing can be important. I can then take and change where that foam is.
Oh.
So see how you guys are always in a place that you can improve how the foam is, or if you're like, oh no, I want it to be, a little bit different, you can lift. And the longer that sits in the water, the more that you can lift, right? So it's just about finding that little space. In this particular case, we're going to come in here. Coming through.
Yeah.
And because there was a little bit of the pigment left over from when we pulled it up, that's another little tonality, making it so much easier for us to have all these little tones.
Yeah.
And I'll come out with a little bit of this wash to make little splashes into the sky. You could also probably splatter. There's not just the white splashing up. There's the kind of aqua color coming up. So see where there's this great splash here?
Yep.
I can lean into that. If you're not getting the white, your paper isn't sized correctly. Well, correctly. It isn't sized like this paper is sized where the paint can sit on top of it. Or the watercolor that you're using is very staining. I don't think, if you were painting with Crayola, that probably won't be your problem. You could probably get away with, very inexpensive, just regular filled out watercolors, like watercolors with a lot of fillers, and good paper, and still get a similar result. But if you're really struggling with your watercolor, I would say the first thing to troubleshoot is your paper. My opinion. Then I can come back with just a damp brush and even make this more interesting. Yeah, and so there we go. And then as that dries, so here's what happens from here. This is quite wet. As it dries, it's going to continue see, I can come here and like if I feel like there's an edge I don't like, look how I can leave that edge because I like its watercoloriness, or I can be like, no, I want to blend that out. So as it dries and it sits, right, and it will dry and it will sit, it's going to keep going into the paper. Come back and lighten this up. See how I did that? So you've got a minute to work with it where you're like, oh, I want, my reflection to be a little more this way. You can always come back and work that. And so that's how it gets. Now, as it sits, it's going to sit into the paper. It's going to keep developing. Right now, it's wrinkled. And that's why I show you the fully dry one at the beginning of the show so you can see what happens as it dries. This changes so much as it dries. I really can't even express to you how much it changes as it dries. And you can keep fiddling with it as it goes through the drying process. See, like I'm doing here? Creating little dimensionality in your splash. How do you find the Fabriano 20% cotton compared to the Artistico? So, Joy, I would say that it doesn't hold water quite as evenly or as long as the Artistico does, but they use the same sizing on all the paper, so it should be performing in a similar way on the way the paint sits on top. And it can be a good way to save money. It can be. I would say the more important thing is to get it in these blocks so that when it dries, it ends up flat again. Because it's going to change a lot as it dries. But right now, you can see the buckling, can't you?
Ah.
So that's the point of the block. If you try to paint this loose sheeted, you have to stretch it and tape it down. And then allow it to dry completely on the stretch. So that is how you paint the watercolor wave. I hope this was a fun little introduction into watercolor and some techniques. Also into waves, about this idea of how the directionality of the stroke and how you paint it out creates the shape of the wave. I want you guys to know we're going to have a Watercolor Wednesday next week. Next week is a heart in a landscape. You can, if you want to see what it is, check the short videos on the YouTube channel. They're 1 minute, and you can get a peek of an upcoming lesson here on the Watercolor channel if you want to see what's coming up. Next week's is on a 1 minute play. You guys want to see what it is? Now, next week, I'm using liquid masking agent, Ultimate Frisket. You can do the lesson without the liquid masking agent. You just have to be careful and be tidy inside your heart. If you want to be all messy and crazy like me, you'll want some of that. And I think there's some of it listed in my Amazon store and stuff, so you can find it pretty easy. Be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and I want to see you at an easel really soon. Bye-bye.